Hey, welcome back to the podcast. We're here with Alex Levin from regal.io, and we're going to be talking about phone marketing, about outbound marketing, and how Regal, with their AI-enabled B2C sales platform, can help you get to where you want to go to talk more and sell more and build the highest answering, best converting sales funnel to hit your growth goals. So Alex, glad to be talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
So yeah, tell me what's the sales pitch, the elevator pitch. If you say my company is regal.io, you should use it right now. You should have used it 2 years ago, but today's the next best thing. Why should we use it? Why is it so great?
We have some time, so I'll give you maybe the longer story instead of just the quick hit. My co-founder and I have known each other a long time, and we come from B2C marketing. And actually, at the last company, we were helping bring home services online. Where the whole idea was, you don't need to go on Main Street and talk to anybody anymore. You can just go on the internet and, get a fence installation or a remodel, whatever it may be. And, so the business we were in owned Angie's List and Home Advisor and Handy and all these, we are the largest home improvements company in the world. But what we found is a lot of people would come to our sites, but the conversion from like interest to actually booking the service was lower online than it used to be on Main Street. And so we ultimately started building teams to engage with these interested prospects. So think of them as sales teams, right? It's very high velocity sale, relatively transactional. But we'd call them and say, you're a homeowner, you want to remodel, tell me more. And that built trust, and it led to a much higher conversion rate. And so we came to this conclusion that the playbook that was used for retail traditionally online, where you had no human connection with the person whatsoever, and you just showed a price and a picture and reviews, and that was it, did not work for local services. And we started looking around to see what other industries that old retail playbook did not work for. And we found all these industries that are more considered, things like healthcare, education, lending, financial services, where insurance, it wasn't enough to just have a website. The website was fine. It's nice. Customers went to it. And then they wanted to talk to a human being to make sure they could actually buy the life insurance or whatever it may be. And we found that they all had a similar challenge. They didn't have tooling built for them. The B2B sales software was built for a very, very expensive, long sales process. Most B2C marketing software didn't even consider the idea of talking to a customer, right? You send an email and you tell them what you want, and that's it. And the email comes from no reply, so they can't even engage if they wanted to. And so we left Angie to build Regal on this premise that there are all these businesses, about half the consumer economy, where it's a more considered purchase. You're going to have a digital experience combined with a human experience, and we want to build a platform to power all of that. So today, our customers are these brands, whether it's SoFi in lending, or AAA in insurance, or Angie in local services, or Open English in education, Row in healthcare, who are these large online businesses that are massively digitizing these services to make them better, but still need to have that human component. And they use Real particularly for those sales teams. So the big differentiator is that we actually allow them to pull in real-time customer data about the customer behaviors to drive proactive outreach at the right moment with the right message. And what it does is it raises answer rates, it raises on-call conversion, which ultimately means higher revenue from the same set of leads. So the same 100 people you're attracting, can you get 3 of them to convert, 4 of them, 5 of them, right? And the more you can convert, the more efficient you are. So that's a bit of our story.
And it's a lot of fun to think about, right? When you think about, especially with the home services, you think about something like a contractor or a plumber or something. My brain just goes crazy in a good way, thinking about, well, if I had a damaged fence, I needed it fixed. If I did a search, found some local result, went to a website, fill in a form, and the phone rings the same day. That sounds like an amazing experience. And it seems like something that very few people do for all these different reasons, right? They're afraid to do it. They don't want to put in the money to pay someone to do it, or they think there's no value in it. But there's a handful of contractors in my town who really have their marketing dialed in really well. And some of these guys, just overall the years of home ownership, so a few of them, like I've had back, 4, 5, 6 times. And sometimes I think like, man, if they just kept in touch a little bit more, and like you said, from the human side of things, if it was a phone call, a voicemail, an email that was not a no reply, there's something there, especially when you say that. And when you have all this data, all the numbers, it does a lot way better. And then you kind of think about you think about, well, if your competition is exactly the same as you, and you're the ones that do the outbound calling and they don't, then that's a fun way to get ahead. And so what are the reasons that people say that they can't do this? Like, do you ever come across it where they say like, oh, phone selling, like doesn't make any sense for me, don't want to do it, all these excuses? What do people say?
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's use an example in home services. My best friend's father was a contractor, and he, had a great business. And part of it was that exactly we were talking about. When a customer came in, he treated them well. He cared about them. They were special. They were unique. They were different, and he engaged with them. And as sort of these online businesses have taken over contracting, what happened? Well, they treated everybody the same. They didn't treat people well. Maybe they didn't even bother having, a phone call with the person. And so that quality of that customer service went way down. And then, if they were calling people, they were just blasting them. You put in your phone number online and, they call you 18 times. And, the person who answers goes, hi, I don't know who you are, but I'm calling you because my boss didn't know. They don't actually say that, but basically that's what's happening, right? They have no idea who you are. And so, what we sort of think about is, how do you treat millions of customers at internet scale like 1 in a million, the same way my friend's father used to treat them? Because if you can do that, like that's the magic, is making it feel like you as a customer special and different, and the brand really cares about you. So, what we think about is obviously, like, you have marketing teams that are attracting people in, using what you know about the marketing channel, what that person is interested in, using what pages they're clicking on your website, using where they live, other first party data, the same way my friend's father would, so that he can get on the phone and say, hi, Alex, I see you're living in New York, and, the Yankees are doing great this year and the weather's nice and whatever else, at huge scale. And so ultimately, that's the key differentiator. Now, I think if you are a big company and you can't do that, you're ultimately going to lose, because, it's something of an arms race in sales and marketing. To your point earlier, if company A doesn't do it or does it badly, and company B does it well, company B is going to get more customers. So, the people who are using our software are using it to drive better and better personalization, better and better outcomes for their customers, which then leads to better outcomes. Today, we by and large only work with companies that already understand that having a human connection is very valuable. We don't really go and proselytize to somebody who's not using that and does not have a phone sales team. But every now and again, big companies come in and go, you know what? We built a big business online without any human connection. Could it be bigger if we had human connection? And then that's an interesting project where they have to hire sales teams and build out the first org around that and use our technology to launch it.
Well, great. And I love your saying there where you said about how if you have 1 million customers, treat them as if they're 1 in a million, and kind of have that personalization. And in this day and age, there's no excuse with all the tracking and the CRMs to be able to pull up that record. And
exactly. There's no excuse. This is what's amazing. In email marketing, 20 years ago, this changed. Even in direct mail, it's now personalized. And when we started looking at the tools in contact center software, the tools that contact center people are using, there's no idea of using customer data. There's no idea of personalization. And I actually know some of the execs of those companies, and they go, yeah, you know what? Our tools are built for efficiency, not for personalization. And it's just a core problem with those tools. And it's why they're becoming obsolete over time, and why people are switching to tools like Regal, is because of the personalization. We can drive better outcomes. So I think, this is not a new trend, but it's a new trend for this specific channel.
And, you mentioned about this idea of kind of playing more of the long game with this personalization, right? You said, like, if you call them 13 times a day and you're just hammering with stuff, that kind of is counterproductive. That goes against what you want to do. And it's always fun to think about just all the bolt-ons in your business, right? You do the email marketing and the physical mail, if that makes sense, and the phone calling. So that way you're kind of everywhere. And I just think like so few businesses do that, right? They're focused on one channel, if at all. And so I can see how the phone call as part of like a larger system can be something that is a lot of fun and something that you can track and tweak and make work really well. And you mentioned in there that sometimes these companies with the phone system in place, they do it incorrectly. So are there any mistakes you see happening with outbound phone calling that just should be fixed, but people still do it and just drives you crazy? Anything come to
Oh
mind?
yeah. So I used to run big contact center teams. So like, I've made all these mistakes myself. So I don't need to say like, here's what other people are doing. I can say, here are the mistakes that I've made specifically. And a lot of it is not due to the fact that like I didn't understand it was a mistake. A lot of it was due to the fact that the technology I had didn't allow me to do it in a better way. So take an example. Um, customers would come to our site in home services industry, millions of customers a month, and they type in their phone number. And I wanted to personalize things for them, but the tools that we use, the old contact center software tools like Nice, Five9, Genesis, would basically just allow us to put those numbers in a dialer. If you've ever heard of like a power dialer or predictive dialer, and dial them as fast as we could. And what ends up happening? Well, my boss would then say, "Hey, Alex, like, drive some more revenue." The only lever I had was dial them even faster, meaning like faster from when the lead was submitted or dial them more times. That was it. Those are my levers. And so in the short term, the way to drive more revenue was to do that. In the long term, to your point, that ultimately had really negative impact because customers got angry, they didn't like the brand, and they wouldn't come back. So it created this like really perverse system. I think what sort of we offer people, and the reason why people in marketing and sales are so excited about Regal is that we give them other levers to engage those customers. So instead of just calling them really fast and calling them many times, which are their old levers, they can now use branded caller ID and behavioral information to trigger a journey, cross-channel orchestration to your point, scripting, conversation intelligence to drive next actions. And these are all things that can improve either the answer rate, the on-call conversion, or the dollars per conversion, resulting in more revenue. So, that's I'd say the classic mistake. The other one that sort of comes up if I look at these teams is they sort of use the wrong metaphor because there wasn't sort of a metaphor to use. Either they're thinking, well, really, this phone team is like I know it's like cold calling. They'll think it's like cold calling. So let me just treat it all like cold calling. Well, no, it's not cold calling. And if you treat it that way, you're missing an opportunity because you actually, in most of the companies or all the companies we work with, we know a lot about the customer. These are inbound leads. They're coming to us. They're asking for specific things. So don't treat them like cold calling. It's the wrong metaphor. Or they go, well, I know sales, it's B2B sales. So let's do this like B2B sales where I assign the lead to a salesperson. They're really smart. They're going to move it through stages in the sales funnel in Salesforce, and that'll work. Well, no, it doesn't, because this is not like, a thing where the salesperson has 5 leads. They have 500 leads. They can't possibly stay on top of what's going on. And it's not like sales in B2B where there's a very clear sales funnel. In B2C, take our customer SoFi, an end user may come in and initially be interested in student loan refinance, then deposit money in a bank, then look for a mortgage, then whatever. This is not linear. So it's a much more complicated set of actions the customer is taking. And you need those salespeople to have tools that are proactively helping them understand what to do next, rather than relying on the agent to be brilliant enough to know that this user that they were talking to about a student loan is now looking for a mortgage and just clicked on an email about that. There's no way they could possibly do that for 500 customers. So I think that's a classic issue right now when there's not a clear metaphor, there's not a clear way of understanding what should be done. People kind of struggle with how to set these teams up.
That makes a lot of sense when there's no strategy and they're just, like you said, like they try to approach it linearly, like, oh, they're on stage 1 and then stage 2. And you're saying that
Yeah,
there's more like branching. It's more like a flow
yeah.
chart that might go over this other path.
The closest I try to sort of impress upon people is, think about how email marketing works. And the challenge is that marketers understand how email marketing works, but salespeople classically have not had that experience yet. And so if they haven't seen it, there's an education period where they go, oh my God, I didn't even know these tools were available for marketing automation in this sort of sales funnel. And as soon as they see the tools and they understand them, they're very excited. But because historically they didn't have them, they fall into, like I say, either the cold calling parallel or the B2B sales parallel, both of which are wrong for this B2C sales motion.
And at least for me, it gets the gears turning in my brain. It gets me excited in these different ways, kind of thinking, kind of in the thinking about like the metaphor, like the diagram, or like thinking abstractly, right? And thinking about where there are these 500 leads, like how wide am I going to go and how deep am I going to go, and at what point do they disqualify themselves, or at what point do I give up, and then I can focus on this
Yeah.
kind
And
of
at what
core.
point do you sort of have agents that focus on some, and we have AI bots that can focus on others, so you can decide are all of them worth? And in the end, we realize it's just an ROI calculation from the business perspective. So in each place throughout the customer's journey where maybe you send them an email today, think about having a conversation and go and A/B test it. Have 90% not get the conversation and have 10% get the conversation. And if it costs you, I don't know, $5 a conversation, but you get $10 of revenue back or customer lifetime value back, or in healthcare, a better outcome for the patient, well, then it's worth doing it. But if you spend $5 on that conversation and it doesn't happen, then stop and go try another one. So instead of having the mindset that a conversation is too expensive and it couldn't possibly work, well, it does actually work. And in many different situations, it's worth testing, whether that's acquisition, month one retention, cross-sell, upsell, win back. These are all moments where email is classically used and people are afraid to have a human conversation. What I talk about with some brands also is it's not just all or none, right? You might find that in month one retention, it's really valuable to have a conversation with customers who have an current customer value of over $500, but don't do it for customers under that amount. A very simple example would be if they go and they're going to go shopping online for some amount of food. If they put $200 in their basket, don't call them next month. If they put $500 in their basket, do call them, because it may be worth doing this for customers that are spending more money on your platform, even if not for everybody. So like if you want to think about this, one industry that's very interesting is gaming and gambling. So historically, they had people that worked with whales, and they've really struggled in casinos to figure out that same one-on-one experience as you go down the sort of amount that people are gambling. With some of the new technology that exists, like you can give people the same level of support and service, even if they're not spending, $100,000 on the table. They may only be spending 1,000. Doesn't mean they're not an important customer. You should still be engaging with them and supporting them to make sure that they have a good experience. Today, can we do it for somebody who's spending only $1? Probably not yet. But perhaps as AI becomes more effective, then for the low end, you can use some kind of AI bot to help that person, even if it's not a real human being.
I guess the aha I'm getting from having this conversation with you is everyone's obsessed with the data, right? It's all about the AI and the data
Yeah.
and all the customer information. And then in order, and like you talk a lot about like numbers and KPIs and percentages. And when people talk about like being scientific, there is kind of a limited thinking, right? They think about terms of like calculations, but you're making me think back to like when I was maybe like 9 or 10 years old in science class, and they taught us that in a like the scientific method, you'd have a hypothesis, right? You'd say, here's my objective, and then here's my hypothesis, and here's something I want to try. And then you go and take the small calculated risks, you perform the experiment, and then you look at the results, and then you say, okay, well, was I completely wrong? Was I on the right track? Or did my educated guess pay off? And I think that when you're talking about crunching the numbers and doing the data, that's a more adventurous way of looking at it, right? As opposed to just like
Yeah.
doing things the way they've always been done, or let the numbers speak to you. It's like you're saying, well, figure out what you think will work, and then have a clear plan and then put it in place and say, am I going to target these customers? I'm going to put them through this funnel, have this sequence, have this messaging, and then look at your results and just see like, is this something that I want to give up before it gets too expensive and try something else? Or is this promising? And then do I just kind of double down on my efforts and multiply and scale?
Yeah. And I'll add something even to that, which is that you got to start, I think, first by looking at, is this a business that can support the kind of hypothesis and A/B testing driven workflow? So I've been in businesses that are very slow moving, like the steel business, where a contract might get signed over 6 months and the steel's not even delivered till a year later. So, A/B testing in the steel industry for, the manufacturing of the steel is a year and a half process. If I say, hey, I want to try it with a slightly different chemical composition, a year and a half later, you get the steel. So it's very, very hard to do A/B testing because of that. On the other hand, I've been in businesses where it's a very low price product sold online where you have millions of people coming in, every day, every second, and you can put a small percentage on a slightly different path and then see what the outcome is. So first, take stock of what is your business? Is it the year and a half, or is it the, millions of people a second, or probably somewhere in between? And understand what your tolerance is for risk. Obviously, if you're building software for, a plane, your tolerance for risk is much lower. If you're, selling a calculator online, probably your tolerance for risk and testing is higher. Once you have that, that'll give you some, framework of should I be testing or not. Then, use a statistical significance calculator to understand how many people do I need to put through each of the experiments in order to even have a real answer. Often, mistake I see is people put some small number of customers through an experiment and see a difference in lift, and they go, an answer, but actually it's not statistically significant. So, if you have millions of people in each variant and a big difference in the outcomes, it's easy, but very often it's not that simple. So check a statistical significance calculator for how many people you need to have in each version. And then start testing and just have a list of the 20 hypotheses, to your point, that you want to test. Should I text or email them first? What happens if I change this? What happens if I don't give my website at all? So on and so forth. And have, 50-50, or 90-10, whichever you want, and always keep a holdout group, meaning never have 100% of people on the new way right away. Always keep some percentage on the old way so you can see in real time, is this really driving the outcome that I want? So once you have that, you then sort of declare a winner and you say either the test one or the control one, and you move on to the next one. You keep iterating. The thing I try to impress upon people is that the most successful businesses fail very fast, a lot of times. So it's not about reducing the amount of failure. Again, forget the businesses that are sort of ones where you can't fail, but it's not about reducing failure. It's about increasing how quickly you can fail so you can get forward faster. The biggest problem I see with entrepreneurs is when they're so afraid to change things that they don't iterate at all, and now they're stuck. And even if they had a good product at the time, 6 years later, everybody else has surpassed them. So, I think you have to find the way to internally have a value culturally that you can iterate and fail, recognize the failure, not, don't make the same mistake twice, and then continue moving on.
I think that is very valuable entrepreneurial and business owner advice. Get to the failure quickly, not on purpose, not because like you want to fail, just because the average person or the below average person is spending too much time dreaming. And they take,
and I can't tell you
months,
how many times the things we thought in advance were just wrong. And as we dug into the test and talked to people who went both ways, we go, oh, wow, we were thinking about this incorrectly. And that allowed us, even though that test failed, to go do the next thing that did work for us. The last thought I'll leave you and the listeners with is the other mistake I see people make in tests is they test too small, meaning they have a website and they make the color the button red instead of blue. Yes, in theory, that could make a little bit of difference. But if you want to test different website flows, as an example, make huge changes. Because by making huge changes, if there's the possibility for there to be a difference, you're going to see it. By making a small change, very likely nothing will happen. And then you've just wasted a couple of weeks of testing. And then another small change, you've wasted a few weeks. And now you're wasting time. So the first thing to do in whatever you're testing is make the most extreme version of the thing to see if there's any signal. If something's moving, you'll very quickly see if it's in a good or bad direction, and then you can iterate. But don't make a small test. So, hey, if you want to go and, I don't know, test the price change, don't change it 1%. Change it 20% and see if it has any impact. And then, optimize from there.
That's great advice. Be more extreme. That way you can see if your tests, your experiments actually make a difference. And that's good advice in general. Take bigger risks, think bigger, and don't just play it safe and be stuck in your little box. And so if someone out there says, I like this idea, of doing the better phone outreach. And we already kind of disqualified a few people by saying, if you're not sure about the idea, then go somewhere else. But if you say you see the value in the phone outbound outreach and they want to check out regal.io, how does a listener know if their company is a good fit for you and your service, and how do they take some action?
Yeah. If B2C sales, if high velocity sales is a critical part of your customer onboarding funnel, we'd love to talk to you. Typically, the things that we hear from these customers are having trouble reaching customers. The conversion rate's not as high as they want. They're getting beaten by competitors when it comes to these customers that are coming to their site. We particularly work with mid-size and larger businesses, not SMB. And I'd say the main industries we work with are healthcare, insurance, lending, local services, education. But there are, a couple others that we dabble in. So anybody in that sort of group, please go to regal.io. Feel free to email me at hello@regal.io, and I'd love to chat.
Fantastic. And so if that sounds like you, if you feel like you fit in those business categories and you have those similar bottlenecks, you say, my numbers are only getting this far, I'm only converting so well, my customer value is only this high, and you want to up your game, then the very next step, the thing to do right now before this podcast is even over, is go to regal.io. That's regal.io. And if you want to email Alex directly, that is hello@regal.io. We will see you there. And thank you very much, Alex, for opening our eyes and giving us some of these fun experiments to think about.
Thank you.